Today, new warning signs for President Trump and the Republican Party ahead of the midterms as a key voting bloc becomes more and more unhappy with the president. A new Reuters Ipsos poll showing a dramatic drop in support for Trump among rural voters. Farmers hit hard by rising gas prices, fertilizer shortages, and reduced exports, making their dissatisfaction known to the president and those on Capitol Hill. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle remain hopeful about their respective chances in November's midterms.
Because of our overperformance in 2024 with candidates who were focused on the economy, we only need to flip a handful of seats. There are far too many people who are working hard, they're playing by the rules, but they can't thrive and can barely survive.
We continue to see more and more Republicans showing stronger and stronger polling numbers. We also see in multiple states where there's not a Democrat running at all, or there's an independent running, and Democrats are saying vote for the independent here.
Let's bring in Democratic strategist and author Jenna Arnold and Republican strategist and MS Now political analyst Susan Del Percio. Susan, I hear kind of a different story from a lot of Republicans than what we just heard from Senator James Lankford, which is, yes, maybe they're saying it more privately, but they don't really think their chances are good in the midterm. So how big of a blow is this loss in support, especially from rural voters, for the president?
It's huge. And it's funny. It's really bad news for Republicans. I don't think the president really cares about seeing his support dwindle, because he wouldn't be doing the things that he's been doing over the last 2 years if he really cared what the American public thought. He knows he has his base, and that's all he cares about. But these rural numbers are really important, because I think they also tell a bigger picture where things are amplified in other places. Those numbers don't just affect, it's not just gas prices or the war or grocery prices. It's also in rural communities, things like the cut to, which required congressional approval, the cut to the Postal Service. Postal Service is something that rural communities rely on tremendously, and usually Republicans are the first ones to speak up and protect it. The other issue is health care. Again, with the cuts that were passed in the last big, beautiful bill, if that's what you want to call it, what the Republicans call it, that was something that really affects health care, again, to rural communities. So Lankford has, is trying to sound positive and optimistic, and I am sure you could turn to communities where Republicans are doing well. Most of this country is divided. 50-50. That's why there's such a small amount of swing districts left. But within those swing districts, they are leaning towards Democrats because of issues like health care, rising costs, inflation now. Those are the things that will matter come Election Day.
So, Jenna, how are Democrats going to seize on that? Because the polls are showing a collapse of the coalition that President Trump created in 2024. In the past, Democrats have had trouble with rural voters. So how do you convince those voters and others that were part of that Trump coalition to move over and support Democrats in November?
It's a really good question, and one that we have to handle very carefully and gracefully, because what this poll tells me is that people are paying attention. They may not be changing their identity overnight, nor do we want them to, but they are noticing their checkout bills. So the question is not how do we drag rural voters over to our side. The question is how do we give rural voters permission to use their vote as leverage? You don't have to become a different person to demand cheaper prices, lower fuel costs, but I think Democrats should say to rural voters, you do not owe permanent loyalty to any politician who is making your life more expensive. Make them earn your vote.
I also want to ask you about this new NBC News poll, Jenna, which today shows that Democrats with a 5-point lead on who voters would rather have be controlling Congress. Even independents are leaning towards Democrats by 12 points, and that's a key number. Is it Democrats' election to lose at this point?
Oh, gosh, having just gone through the NBA finals and living in a house where if you say the wrong thing, it's your response. You've jinxed the game. I mean, it's been a whole thing of superstition that I have been living under for the past week. And so I'm nervous about even weighing in on that, I really appreciate one of the commentators for the Knicks who just kept saying the job's not done, the job's not done, the job's not done. And I think that is the motto that Democrats, or frankly, like all private citizens, should use throughout their entire lives, that there is still so much more that we have to do. And to the recent Reuters poll, we have to continue to make sure that we're reaching the demographics who not only feel forgotten, but have been logistically forgotten, like the rural populations. So maybe it's ours to lose, but it's also ours still to earn.
Now, Susan, looking at these numbers for Congress and the president, is this what Republicans in the White House would have expected a year and a half into Trump's second term? Has the GOP essentially squandered its opportunity to maintain full control of government?
Well, I think there were those who would have said, yes, they were squandering their opportunities when they led with the tariffs. Tariffs, if you recall, we were never in great economic condition coming into 2025 when the president was elected again to serve a second term. So when he hit tariffs, I think what we saw was people, Republicans and independents, were willing to hold the line to see what he would do, especially in light of a strong stock market. But that started crumbling away. The other things that Trump has done has cost him support within independents, and they were the vanity projects. There's just so much that the president has done that has focused solely on himself, that Republicans probably, even though they should know better, I know better, that's for sure. I learned that lesson in 2015 when it came to Donald Trump. But what they should have seen is that you cannot rely and trust Donald Trump to do what's right for the American public. The only thing you can rely on is he will always do what is in his best interest.
Well, on that front, Republican senators like Josh Hawley and John Cornyn have a bleak outlook compared to Senator Lankford for the Republicans' chances in the midterms. Cornyn is predicting a disaster that could make Trump's last 2 years in office miserable. So, I mean, do you think that Republicans are going to actually start speaking out more? Right now, Cornyn is a lame duck. He's not going to be in Congress come the rest of President Trump's term. So do you expect Republicans to start to break at all more and more, or are they going to just continue to stay in line with the president as they've done so far?
Well, I'm going to parse that just out a little bit, if you don't mind, and say what Cornyn said about Trump having a really bad second 2 years. I don't think Donald Trump cares if he doesn't get another thing done legislatively or not. He will continue to try and make money and do vanity projects. That's the way he'll continue. Now, when it comes to what Republicans will do, they will continue to do what they've done all along with Donald Trump, which is what is in their best interest. Are they worried about a primary that he will still be in office, for example, if they're running in 2028? Then they will be careful about how they treat the president. If they don't care, or they're part of the YOLO conference, which is you only live once, meaning those are Republicans who have lost their primaries and not coming back, or just decided not to run again, you may see some more independents. The Todd Blanche hearing for AG will be a prime example of that. You're going to have Tom Tillis, who is not running again because he knew he would lose in a primary because of Donald Trump, and John Cornyn on the committee to also see if he will advance a Todd Blanche
nomination. Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry about that. But again, we'll see what Susan Collins does, what McConnell does, what Lisa Murkowski does. You don't need a lot of Republicans to disrupt the agenda. It means, though, you probably won't see a lot of Republicans standing up to him either.
We have to leave it there. But Jenna Arnold and Susan Del Percio, thank you for all of your insights.